welcome back to my channel. So for today I'm going to be showing you guys how to color with these chisel tip markers. I have a few different type of markers here to show you guys. I don't really have any other markers other than these, but I think a lot of chisel tips are probably similar. So yeah, this video was inspired by a comment that I got recently on my 3 marker challenge video. I just did a 3 marker challenge video using these Copic original markers, and in that video I also gave kind of a quick review on the Copic original markers, and I got a comment asking if I could give more tips on how to use chisel tip markers, and instead of just typing it out, I thought I would show you up close how I use them so it would be a bit more helpful. So this video might be a little long. I'm going to try to keep it short, but if you have these markers, maybe grab them out and, well, any type of chisel tip markers, grab them out, grab a piece of paper, and maybe color along with me. Disclaimer though, although I have been using alcohol-based markers for over 15 years, I will never say I'm an expert, and I will never say that I know everything that there is to know. I'm just not that type of person. So if you have additional tips that you would like to add on how to use these markers, or if you do it a different way, definitely feel free to leave it in the comment section below to help out anybody who needs those tips. But please don't be a jerk about it. Don't be mean. Any mean comments will be deleted because I want this video to be a safe space for anybody who wants to learn. So yeah, just be nice about it and just share the wealth. One of the things that I think is great about being an artist on YouTube in this digital age, it makes me sound so old to say that, but yeah, one of the things that's really great about that is that we can share this knowledge. When I was younger, in the 90s, when I'm starting out with art supplies, I had no idea how to use a lot of these things, and I just had to figure it out myself or just not use the art supply unless I could find a book on it. I didn't know any artists, so there was no way to gain this knowledge. So I think that's one really nice thing about the internet and YouTube especially, is that we can all share our knowledge with each other and grow from it. So yeah, enough with my happiness. So yeah, let's get started. These are the three different types of markers I'm going to be showing you guys because they're the only ones I have. I did use Prismacolor back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. But I believe they've changed since I used them, and I don't have them anymore. And I do think the chisel tip was probably the same, but I do know that the smaller side was more of a pen type size. So I don't know if it's different, but hopefully most of these chisel tips are similar, so hopefully this will help you. So just uncap these so you can get a view of what these look like. I am using a Copic original, a Pro marker by Winsor & Newton, and I have 2 Copic sketch markers, and I'll just mostly be using the chisel side so you can see that. Now the Copic original and the Pro marker, yeah, that's the word. See, I'm already sounding a little stupid. Welcome to real time with me. So yeah, the chisel tips look really similar, and so do the bullet tips. They also call them fine tips, so I just tend to call them bullet tips. I don't know why, but yeah. And then the chisel tip on the Copic sketch are just a little bit smaller, but they all have the same type of shape to the chisel. So I think it should work out about the same way. So I'm going to be going over a couple ways that I like to blend these markers, as well as some tips on how to use them in general, and I'll do a little bit of a demonstration as I'm giving the tips. So yeah, I really hope you guys will enjoy this video. I'll do my best, so let's get started. So the first tip that I would have with these chisel tip markers is that I like to utilize both sides of the markers. You could actually get all the effects with the chisel tip, but I think it's easier to just use both sides equally. So like when I'm using the brush tip marker, I will tend to just use the brush, but I really find it easier, especially when you're first starting, to use both sides with the markers. So don't be afraid to keep flipping them around, using them as much as you can, to whatever is the easier side to use. Another tip I have would be to use all sides of the chisel tip. So if you can see here, the chisel tip has a lot of different grooves and cuts to it. And you can use all of these sides to do a different type of effect. Show you the other one. For example, when you lay the chisel tip flat on the paper, it'll make a line like this, because the base of the chisel tip here is very flat. So this can also, you could do lines like this, almost looks like bricks or something, and you can just press it down flat and pull, oops, like this. You get a pretty nice line when you do that. Also on this one, just press it down flat. And flat like this. The way that I tend to use the most, let's get this out of the way, is the tip right here. Especially when I'm doing a smaller illustration, I want to fill a large area, I will tend to use the tips right here a lot. So I will hold the pen like this, with the tip down. And this, when you do this, you can get a line like this. It's a very fine area. Very fine area. I said find. And then use small circles to fill in an area and make smooth coloring. Like that. This way. This kind of line. See, if I just use this tip and pull this way, I get this kind of line. It's a bit thicker. But if I use the same tip and I go this way, I get a thinner line. You can even try to use the back end, but it's very uncomfortable to do that. And it'll just give the same type of line. So I tend to use this front tip more. And of course your pressure will also affect. If you put a lot of pressure, you're gonna get a thicker line. And if you just gently touch it, you'll get a thinner line. It's not a huge difference like you would see with the brush tip, but everything is still a bit pressure sensitive, really, depending on how much is your pressure. So yeah, the biggest tip I can definitely give is do not be afraid to keep moving this chisel tip around until you find a really useful spot to use. You can even do like this type of mark. You can put it on the very edge like this and get dots. So you're angling it down and you're getting it from here. Little dots. So there's all kinds of marks you can make with this chisel tip, as long as you are willing to experiment and give it a try. The bullet tip, it's a bit more straightforward. You get dots, you get a line. I really don't know any other way to get a mark from it. Maybe on the side you can get a thicker line, but it's more straightforward. So if you are really experienced, you could actually make the chisel tip work for you in a lot of different ways. But I still would suggest to use both at first so that you kind of get used to both and they both have their own unique abilities. Before I forget, you can also use the chisel tip to do the small circles as well. Small circles will work with any type of tip. It just helps you to give an even coloring. And any type of alcohol marker, the quicker you work, the better to blend. If the ink is still wet, there's a better chance to blend. And a good way to blend is to keep going over and over the same area with the two colors until you feel it's vibrant enough and it looks smooth enough, like that. Okay, so I'm going to go into blending techniques now. I hope I'm not forgetting everything. I kind of have a little bit of list of things to say in case I forget something, but you never know what you're going to remember, right? So we're going to go on to blending types. So when I use a Copic sketch marker with the brush tips, my favorite way to blend is kind of like a flicking motion. So I will put the tip of the marker down and put a little bit of a pressure. It makes a mark kind of like that. And then I will move this way, or whatever way you want to move, while lifting up. So I'll put pressure, lift up, and move to the side. And you get a mark like this. So if you just build up marks like that, this is especially good when you're doing hair and you want to have like a hair shine, especially for like anime style. This is the way I love to do hair. And it's also really good if you're blending two colors together. Sorry, I uncapped the wrong side. I do that all the time. And again, I'm just going to put pressure on the tip. And it's on the side, by the way. And I'm going to move this way while slowly lifting up. Well, not slowly. It makes a nice tapered line. And that's the spot where the two colors meet. So the concentration is back here and it's a bit later there. And with blending, you just want to keep switching between the two until it looks nice and smooth where the two meet. However, you know, just if you're satisfied. And with alcohol-based markers, it's better to kind of use, if you're blending two colors, have them ready in your hand like this. Like just use them both, just have them out ready to go. It just makes it so much easier and you can blend faster, because the faster you move the better, because as long as the ink is still wet, it'll blend better. So that would be how I blend with the brush tip. I find it's still possible to do the same method with a bullet tip or a chisel tip. It just doesn't look as nice where the two colors meet, but it's still possible. So I'll show that. I'm going to take this chisel tip marker and I'm going to use the flat end. I'm going to apply the flat end to the paper, getting like the kind of brick line. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move this way, applying pressure and then lifting up. So you can see it's not as nice of a taper, and it's more noticeable where the lines meet. The way to get rid of streakiness is just keep going over it. Just keep at it. See, it looks so much smoother now. And now I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to apply pressure to the tip on the flat end. Move this way while pressing and then lifting up. So all your pressure should be back here, and up here it's later. It's barely touching. And it might take some time to get used to this type of movement, but just keep at it. You'll get it there. You'll get there eventually. Just don't give up too easily. And just keep going over the two sides until you feel it looks really well blended. Like that. It also helps if you're using two colors that work well together. These two colors seem to work pretty well together. I have B05 and BG13. So there's a bit of a difference between the two, but I think they look nice together. So it actually blends pretty good this way. But if I was using two colors that don't work as well, you may be noticing the lines here more. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the bullet nibs now. I've got these two, which by the way, this is the Pro marker in the cobalt blue, and the RV17 Deep Magenta Copic Original. So the bullet tips, I would do the same thing. I just, at the tip, put pressure and then lift up. I am sure there's some people who, well, I'm assuming there's some people who are able to do this well, but for me, I struggle really hard with using the bullet tip this way, because I like to do this kind of method for hair, and I've definitely been struggling with this method. I don't think it's going to get any better than that. So you can see it's not as pretty with the bullet tip, but that could be my inexperience. I'm not quite sure. But that is a method for you to see. I would call this like the flick blend. I don't know. I don't know what other people would call this term at all. Another way that I would color with these type of markers to get a nice looking blend would actually be to do just a flat color and then come back over the flat color once it's dry with a kind of cell shading look. I would also call it glazing, but that's because I've been using way too much watercolor and I'm not sure what else term to use, but I think other people call it cell shading. So for an example, I'll show something really quick. And by the way, to avoid streakiness, I think I've already said this, but I'll say it again. Just keep going over the same area as much as you can. You can also try applying in a different direction. And when in doubt, just do small circles. That'll give you the smoothest coverage. And of course, work quickly, because alcohol-based markers work best when you color them in as coloring an area as quickly as possible, so that the ink is still wet and it settles into a nice smooth coloring. So I'll let this dry a little bit. It's still a little wet, but that would be like the flat coloring, and then I would come in on top of it with another color to indicate shadow. Just put something here. And this is what I did a lot in my 3 marker challenge video. In the girl's hair, I did a lot of just this shadow. It kind of works out. If you don't like the color blend, I have very limited colors. That's why I'm using these. I only have 3 Copic Originals and I only have about 12 Pro markers. So that's why I'm using kind of odd colors. But you can also go back over the shaded area to help kind of tone it down and blend it a bit. I felt like that line there was a little too obvious, so I blended it out. Another way you can kind of give yourself a leg up, especially like I like to do this when I'm coloring hair a lot. I will do a flat color. This is getting a little dry. Might have to refill this soon. So I'll do a flat color with the hair, especially. Like, this will work anywhere, but I really like to use it for hair. And I might indicate shadow with the same color. So or like I would highlight the lines that I've created for the hair, because it depends on the color. But some colors, when you do this type of line, it will dry and still be kind of obvious. So it's a really good way to kind of indicate shadow, or like try to test out where you want to put your shadow without committing too much, because with other colors, the added color will just kind of disappear. Plus, it's not super obvious. I think if you put some actual shading in the same spot, you might not notice this other color as much. So I guess that would be a little bit of a tip for kind of testing the waters when you're not sure where you want to put shadow and light. Another thing I really like to do is I will take the bullet nib and kind of outline an area I want to fill. A way to get a large area filled without kind of losing your sanity because you're trying to keep it not streaky would be to kind of just map out certain areas, like do chunks. This is especially good with hair. You try to look at the way the hair flows and kind of cut one chunk out so that you can just fill that one area. I know this looks really bad, but you kind of get what I'm trying to say. So I'll use the bullet tip to kind of outline the area, and then I'll come back in with the chisel tip. And again, I'm going to be using the tip because I really like to use the tip the most, which is this spot right here. Sorry if that's out of focus or something. There we go. I had to stand up to make sure that worked. So I will put the tip down on the paper. It makes kind of a mark like that if you just place it down. And I'll just do small circles to fill it in. And you'll notice kind of a line between where the bullet tip had passed by and where this one's going over. So just try to go over that carefully so it kind of blends out the harsh line. And I'm sure I've said this twice now, but with alcohol-based markers, you just try to work as quickly as you can, because once the ink dries, it gets more difficult to smooth out the color. It still might be possible, it just gets more difficult. So I'm just doing smooth circles. I actually kind of like when it gives that really uneven look, but you might not like that. So my advice in that situation, if you don't want the uneven look, would be to just keep going over. I might flip it over and I'll use the base, so this part, and fill it in because it's a lot faster. And I'm again using circles. Sometimes you can do streaks too. It's best to do like streaky motions if you are moving in the same way that the object would naturally flow, because the streaks might become visible. So try to go in the natural movement. So like you can, wow, I think my marker's really dry. Okay, I'm gonna stop here and refill my marker and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, sorry about that. Just so if you're new to these markers, don't be afraid, they don't dry out so easily. I've just been using these pretty heavily. I first got the chisel tip markers about a month ago, and I have been using them constantly in my sketchbook to get used to the tips again, because I have been using the brush tip markers for 10 years exclusively. It's been a really long time since I used the chisel tip, so I had been using them quite a lot in my sketchbook, and I'll actually show you more about that later. But yeah, so that's much better. So if you're doing hair, you can, if it like flows the correct way, it also gives kind of a nice effect, because the streakiness can be used in a good way in that way. Also, if you're doing like a river or something, just go with the motion of the natural movement of the object and it'll look a lot nicer. So I think now I'll just draw something really quick and color it in and give you some tips as I'm going, or like just show you the points that I'm using. And that brings me to another tip for you guys. I'm gonna get some paper. By the way, this is just plain cardstock paper. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. I bought it from Amazon and it was recommended by a lot of artists on YouTube. So I tried it out and I like it. But you can use really anything with these markers. You can use just like sketchbook paper or printer paper. I used printer paper a lot when I was younger, but I find that certain types of thicker paper like Bristol board or cardstock works a bit better. For example, another tip If you have paper or a type of marker that tends to spread a lot, and by spreadage I mean when you put the tip of the marker down on the paper, you might see the ink spread out a little bit. It doesn't do that as much with this paper, but I know it did it really badly with my computer paper. So if you have that issue when you're doing coloring, I would suggest, let's say this is like the black line, I would suggest to like apply it further back a little bit. So I know with my old Prismacolor markers, the fine tip used to do that a lot. So I would start coloring like back here, and I would let it continue to spread out to fill this gap, which was really helpful at the time. So that's another tip for you. My very last tip for you guys, which I'll talk about as I'm sketching something, and it's kind of relevant to this as well, is that when it comes to trying out a new medium like maybe chisel tip markers or any type of paint really, I think the best advice I can give is that do not start getting used to a new type of coloring product by forcing yourself to do your best work, like using drawings that are like the best you can draw. I think it's better to just do very simple, very quick drawings, because it takes off the pressure. It doesn't matter if the drawing looks ugly. You don't have to share the drawing. You don't have to let it see the light of day. It doesn't have to be your best work. Just something simple, just draw something very quick, color in a doodle. You could use coloring book pages. Maybe you bought a coloring book, an adult coloring book, or a kid's coloring book. There's some really cute kids coloring books. Just anything, because you're not practicing drawing, you're practicing coloring. So just do something really quick just so you can get to the coloring part. That's what I found to be the best advice for myself, because there have been times when I was getting used to doing something new, like when I was getting used to watercolors, and I would put so much stress on myself to do this big masterpiece right away with my watercolors, when I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to share these drawings. I didn't have to make them amazing. I just wanted to try out the watercolors. So it's kind of better to just use doodles, and you won't kind of be so disappointed in the results that you feel like burnt out. Just focus on just getting something on the paper in order to color it, and you know, keep going. Just keep going. Once I'm done with this, I'll show you my sketchbook that I started. I started using my markers in my sketchbook about a month ago when I started with these chisel tip markers. I'm sorry, I can't think well when I'm sketching. And as you can see, it's not a perfect sketch. It's not even nice from my standard. It's just a doodle. This is the type of thing I would just doodle in my sketchbook, or I would doodle on a piece of paper while I'm hold on the phone or something like that. So yeah, it does not have to be perfect. It's just about getting the practice in, and don't put so much pressure on yourself. Just keep trying with these. When I first started with the chisel tip markers, I was so used to the brush tips that I did not know what I was doing, and it felt really awkward, and it was bad. But after about a month of just doing lots of tiny little sketches, and I do mean tiny, I would pretty much do this type of size, like four to a paper or 3 to a paper, and it helped out a lot, because I would just get used to it, and now I don't feel any weirdness at all using the chisel tip marker. So I think that's good enough for a sketch. I'll just try to make sure that this is in frame. That might be a little difficult to see, so I'm going to quickly line it with my multi-liner. I'll just use the thicker line, but it'll be quicker. I'm using my Copic Cool Gray multi-liner in 0.3. I usually use a smaller size. This is quite large for me, but this will be very quick. And again, I'm not trying to be perfect. I just want to get to the coloring. Give your little elf ears. Of course, to have fun with it though, you know. Have fun with it. Just do what you want. Just don't put pressure on yourself to make it amazing. And don't worry about showing this later. You don't have to show it to anybody. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I think that's kind of important. Okay, I'm just gonna let that dry for a minute or two and then erase, and then we'll start the coloring. Another tip I can give when using multi-liners and Copic or any type of alcohol-based marker, if you ever have a lot of bleeding with the pen line, where the pen line just kind of smears into the ink, it's actually pretty good to go over it with maybe like a rubber eraser like this, or any type of eraser, because it kind of helps to pick up any extra ink and also give it ample time to dry. I like to let my line work sit for like at least half an hour and then erase and then start to color. So like I'll do something like this where I roll it up like a log and then just roll it over to make sure any pencil lines and excess ink might be picked up. You don't really see any evidence of it, but it's just something that I found to be really helpful. Of course, if it's not alcohol proof or like alcohol marker proof, Copic proof, it's going to smear. So there's nothing you can do like in that case except for to try to avoid the lines when you can. So there's still a way to save it if you just kind of try to avoid coloring over the lines. You can also just go straight in with the marker on top of pencil, which is what I was doing in my sketchbook. I looked it up and Copic doesn't really suggest you do that, but they also said that it wouldn't really clog the nib, but it will discolor the nib, and I'll show you an example. I've discolored, sorry, that sounds kind of funny. I've discolored this nib pretty badly from just using it over pencil lines, but you know, it's kind of fun too. And so far I haven't had any issues with the pencil lines clogging. So yeah, here's my very quick little doodle, and I'm just gonna fill it in with my markers here and try to talk about the way I'm using the marker as I go, in case you're unsure. So when it comes to hair, the hair grows out from like this area here, so it's good to have it flow. So when you're coloring, it's good to follow the flow. And also, like I said, if you want something more smooth and a little bit more easy to deal with, for sanity reasons, it's better to like kind of cut off a strand. So like here, I would kind of cut off this part, and I'm using the bullet tip to outline because I like to do that. So I'm kind of showing myself I'm going to use this area. This spot here is really small, so I'm just going to use the bullet tip in circle motions and flicks to fill this in. See if I can get some hair shiny. I find this part difficult, but I think it could be possible to do this if you just get used to it. Going for super shiny. So yeah, that's not so bad. And I'm not even thinking about where I'm putting the shine. This isn't a masterpiece, I'm just filling it in. It looks a little streaky here, so I'm gonna go over this area again. But I'm using just the lines to make it work. Just don't discourage yourself if your drawing looks really streaky at first, and don't feel too bad if it feels like really uncomfortable at first. Just keep at it. Seriously, just keep at it. You'll get it eventually. Sometimes you just have to find the ways that work for you. It might not even be these ways, but if you just keep at it, you'll eventually find the ways that work for you. So this is working pretty well to just do the lines. It's looking pretty smooth. So I'm gonna keep that up, and I can kind of cut this area off, and I'm gonna do this spot too, kind of circles to kind of smooth that out. Maybe I will give her a blue streak in her hair. So I'll switch to this one and I'll just like indicate kind of a streak. Just have fun with it. Again, using the bullet tip to kind of outline the area. And I'm using the bullet tip here. I should use a chisel tip more so you guys can see. So I'm going to be using the tip right here. This tip will give you the smallest line. It looks like this when you press it down. Or if you tilt it forward, see this is the flat side, you can make a flat line, but then you tilt it forward, you can get an even smaller spot here. So pretty much this tip here is the best place to get the smallest line with the chisel tip. So I'm just gonna hold it like this, put it on the paper, and do kind of smooth circles and lines going up. I'm also covering over the area where the bullet tip was because I did not move quickly enough and it's dried. Now I'm using the flat side that looks like that to kind of pull from the scalp down. And another, okay, and again, just go over the same area a few times to get smooth coloring. Sometimes you might have to go over the same area you don't want to go over just to smooth out anything that looks like it doesn't look smooth enough for you. Maybe I'll just make it multicolored. Let's try the Copic chisel tip for the rest of this side. Let's just have fun with it. So this is the same. I'm using the tip here. It's just a smaller chisel tip, but it's the same shape as all the others. So just pulling down. Now I'm going to use the point here. So the point is pointed this way. Try to get a nice line. If you're going into an area where you only have a chisel tip, you don't have a smaller point at all, like with this Copic Original, unless I switch to the brush nib, I'm not going to get a smaller. And just now I wanted a large area filled, so I did the flat side. You just have to keep moving it around till you get a nice thin line to help you fill it out. And now I'm using the thinnest part of the tip and just doing kind of flick line motions. Trying to remember to tell you guys what I'm doing, but it's not like something I'm used to, because usually I just color quietly. So yeah, hopefully that was clear. The tip is good for small areas. The flat end is good for bigger areas. And you can also, a medium area would be if you put the tip and then pull, instead of just using the tip and doing this way. Hopefully that's understandable. So for a little bit of fun, when I do my sketchbook especially, I might use, like, especially if I have limited colors, which I have been having recently, I might use like the tip of the marker, the smallest side, and I'll just kind of indicate a shadow on the skin, so that it kind of looks like it's colored, even though it's not. And I'm not great at shadow and light, by the way, so no need to comment on that. But yeah, it's something that just never really clicked in my head, and I'm still trying to work on. But this is the way I do face shadowing. So I'm just kind of indicating that it has some kind of color without going over the whole area. Maybe I'm just gonna shade, like, maybe I'll switch to a different color here and do some kind of shirt or something. So you can just have fun with it. You could use the streakiness to your advantage. I'm putting the flat end down, flat, and just pulling. Nice sketch type thing. To fill in a very large area, like in my 3 marker challenge, I did a background and I wanted something kind of interesting, so I actually just did the flat side and pulled down over and over and over and over again in the background. And then I just kind of went over that with other colors as well. And so it kind of looks smooth. It's still a bit streaky, but I then went over it with some alcohol that I just dropped in and some gouache to kind of cover it up. And in that video, I also tried to fill in a separate color. I should use a separate color to show that. In big circles, like that, to try to go over some of the area. So that is just some of the ways you can, like, try to use the marks to your advantage. Whatever marks it makes, you can try to use it to your advantage. Like I did with this, like, kind of shirt here. Layer the colors, just using the flat side like this. See, like, even the one great thing about the chisel tip markers, it can make a really nice straight line, so you can use that to your advantage throughout the drawing. Same way, like with a brush tip marker, it makes a really interesting mark when you do this. So you could just use the marks to your advantage when you do something in the background, or foliage or flower or something, some kind of interesting texture. So yeah, I think that's everything really. I hope that I covered everything as good as I could. I hope this was, like, helpful for you. Just keep turning the marker, keep finding the different marks that it makes, and find out what works best for you. Don't be afraid of it. Just keep trying. You will get there. Just keep trying. And just so you can see what I was talking about, this is my sketchbook. Try to get to the relevant page. And when I first got these markers, I had no idea what I was doing, but I just kept at it. And these are the kind of rough sketches that I did. This was when I used the Copic Originals for the first time. I just kept trying different combinations to see what worked best for skin, what worked best for hair, what worked best for everything, how it kind of blended. Just trying everything. And these were done with the Pro markers. I think this was the very first time I used the chisel tip, and I had no idea what I was doing, and it looked terrible, but I just kept at it. Just got to keep at it. Here's another page. And a few more tests with markers here. And another page of marker tests here. So, you know, these drawings are not perfect. They're not amazing. They're not something I even want to put on Instagram half the time. But they gave me a chance to just try out the markers, try out different combinations of colors, try out the tips and get different effects, and just kind of just let yourself try things. So so that's everything I can think of to talk about. So I hope that this video was helpful, and I hope that I was clear. I'm sorry if I am not great at explaining things, but if you have any tips or tricks for using these chisel tip markers, then definitely leave a comment in the description below to let everybody else know. It'll be really helpful. So anybody looking for more tips, definitely check out the comment section, and hopefully there'll be something there for you guys. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, definitely give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below to let me know. I'd really appreciate that. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel. I post art related videos every week. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.